What a good-looking group on such a cold December morning in Lake Forest. But my name is Mike Zafrowski. Welcome to the 143rd session of Faith at Work. Ian, welcome.
I'm so honored to be here. It's a blessing.
We've talked about this for a number of years, so really looking forward to this.
Yeah.
We always start with a prayer. So, Father Luke.
Thank you, Mike. Ian, wonderful to have you here. The Bible starts with the book of Genesis. The G-E-N, the gen, in Genesis, springs from the root of generosity. Generosity bestowed upon a humanity made in God's image. We welcome this morning Ian Rowe, whose ministry has focused on enabling many souls to share our Creator's generosity. Let us pray. O Lord of heaven and earth, we are grateful for the many possibilities you have made accessible to humanity. We are especially grateful for Ian and other teachers and leaders that have devoted themselves to enabling many others to share the abundance of your blessings. Help us all to realize that generosity of heart and mind is a primary gift of our Creator and cannot be communicated by mere ideas, but shared by full participation. This we ask in the name of the one who gave himself at Christmas to participate fully in our humanity, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Father Luke. Ian, really looking forward to our discussion. As you know, we'll cover your life story, your faith journey, and for you to share with us the many ways you bring faith to work. We've had speakers of all backgrounds. God does his work many different ways. But before we start the discussion, try to do a very quick bio on Ian. Fred now for 5 years. He has 2 day jobs, plus many other activities, but he's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, which is a public policy think tank. But he's not only an intellectual, he's also a doer. He's run charter schools before, and in 2002, he started the Vertex Partnership Academies.
2022.
I'm sorry, 2022.
Yeah.
Also, he launched an initiative called 1776, highlighting the vision of opportunity and individual agency. He also wrote a very important book, Agency, also back in 2022, and the concept of free, F-R-E-E, and I will not, I'm going to keep you in suspense what free stands for. He also serves as a chairman of a not-for-profit adoption organization. Ian and his wife adopted their first kid, and again, lots of importance of doing that as well in the important formation of families. His parents were born in Jamaica. They moved in London early in their marriage, and Ian was born in London. They immigrated to the United States in 1968, and I told Ian we immigrated in 1969, so at least one area of commonality. He went to the public school system in New York City, attended Cornell University, computer science engineering, Harvard MBA, and his business career has gone from CEO for not-for-profit charter schools. He worked in the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. He had a senior VP post at MTV. They won 2 Public Service Emmy Awards, and also worked in the U.S. government, volunteering in his office after 9/11. Can go on for a long time, but I think enough of a background. Welcome to Faith at Work, Ian.
And let me just say, on 1776 Unites, which is an amazing initiative, the credit for that should go to Bob Woodson,
Of course.
who is another incredible faith-based leader who is very focused on this idea of how to put your faith in action. and how do we get more people of all backgrounds to become agents of their own uplift. So got to give a shout out to Bob on that one.
Absolutely. Well, let's start first of all, I think maybe a broad question, but before delving into your life story, maybe the comments on the most impactful people in your life and how they have formed Ian Rowe today.
Sure. Well, the most impactful people in my life are my parents. You just alluded to my parents grew up in Jamaica, West Indies, and I think I have a picture of them. Everything I've been able to accomplish in my life is some derivative of my parents. Yeah, that's Vincent and Eula. That's Vincent and Eula Rowe. This is on their wedding day in 1957 in England. But they grew up in Jamaica. They met young. They started their romance. My father used to pick my mom up on horseback for their dates. Very romantic, and my mom's parents, they lived in a small town in Lewis in Jamaica, and they helped build the church, the Seventh-day Adventist church. So right next to the house that my mom grew up in was the church that their parents helped to build. So a foundation of faith was always present, foundation of family. Lewis as a town, from the outside looking in, one would say, it's deep poverty from the outside looking in, but the folks in Lewis are not poor in spirit, not poor in faith, not poor in love, so that surrounded my mom, and then ultimately when they brought it into our home, that surrounded me and my brother. And yes, my dad ultimately felt he reached the maximum education level in Jamaica. At the time, Jamaica was an English Commonwealth. So he went to England to finish his studies, missed my mom, so he wrote for her hand in marriage. Like the letter of a lifetime.
Have you read it? Have you seen it?
One of my great life's. My mom never. We could never find the letter. But that would be really great. My mom always used to say, though, when we were older, like when those moments when he wasn't being as romantic. Remember when you used to pick me up on horseback? But because of the time in England, if you were under 21, you had to, get written permission. So you had to write for her, and so she, with her parents now, had to think about their 19-year-old going to England. Anyway, they decided yes. She took a boat all by herself, a 5,000-mile journey to England. And a year later, they got married. They had my brother, and then they had me 7 years later. And the reason they're the most impactful is that my parents, they started a life of adventure where they had each other, they had their faith, they had a commitment to building a family. And they ultimately were married for 48 years before my father passed away and my mom passed away recently. But they believed anything was possible in their life. They had each other. And they certainly transmitted that to me, that I don't have to go through my life alone, that I can find a partner, both my wife partner, but also a faith partner in God, and that if you're able to walk through life knowing that you have these incredible partners, virtually anything is possible. So for those reasons, I would certainly say They were the most impactful. And don't they look great?
Yep.
Yeah, every time I look at that, I just see both of them. Their whole lives are ahead of them. So it's beautiful.
And so the principal focus was on the kids.
Well, yeah, I mean, when they came to the United States, so my parents, as you said, they emigrated to the United States in 1968, which was a bit of a tumultuous year in our nation's history, particularly around issues of race.
MLK, Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy. But, they saw that the country was changing. They saw the Civil Rights Act had passed, the Voting Rights Act had passed. So they, let's put it this way, they weren't running away from Jamaica, nor were they running away from England. They were running to the United States. They felt there was opportunity here. As a young black family, despite everything that may have been going on, they sensed that the underlying principles of the country were ones that if they embraced, they could have a better life, their kids could have a better life. My dad became one of the first early black engineers at IBM. He then became his own entrepreneur, with these fast food stores in the Bronx. And so this concept of agency that I talk about so much didn't come out of nowhere. My parents exercised a lot of agency. My mom started working for what was then, some of the audience might remember Manny Hanny, Manufacturers Hanover Bank, which became Chemical, then Chase, and now JP Morgan Chase. So they built a life, and they saw that possibility. And I think they started, even from that moment when they got married, that as long as they had each other, they had their faith, then anything was possible.
And what did your sense of calling? I mean, when did that start? Was that early on, or was that what are some of the
it's
big
really
moments?
It's really hard to know. I mean, certainly one thing that was very special was in 1991 when my grandmother passed away.
You talked about it.
And she passed away in Lewis, in this very small town in Jamaica. And when someone passes in Jamaica, there's a tradition called 9 at night. And essentially, it's a series of evenings that are built around food and music and joy. And the whole idea is for people to celebrate the person that has just passed. So it's a great, so while you're mourning, you're also in this experience of just incredible joy. And so here I am, relatively young, and I'd never seen anything like this, because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people came out each night to celebrate my grandmother. People I'd never known, never heard about, and others in my family we didn't know, but she had lived this life of faith and action, where again, she had been early with her own parents in conceiving the physical church that's in Lewis, and the impact that she'd had on so many people, her kindness, her ministry, the love that she shared, like the amount of joy that she brought into so many people's lives. I never even conceived that one could do that. You'll never find Mabel Seabright, her name. You'll never find her name on the internet. Like you won't. Like she's not famous in that way, but she was famous in Lewis, and at the core of it was her family. She was the matriarch of the family. She had strong religious faith. She had a deep relationship with God, and all of that sort of emanated from there. So it just gave me a vision for what a faith-based life could mean in practice, right? So meaning that how you live it out, like how you interact with people, what you do with the privileges you have, the blessings we have. So I think that moment for me was probably my first introduction to what a faith-based life could mean in action.
And who would you say believed in you before you had the belief in yourself? Was there above and beyond your parents and your grandmother?
Well, it's hard to top my parents on that front. I mean, there was a time, so when we first came to the United States, I was in '68, and we first originally moved to Brooklyn, and then we moved on up to Queens. Again, so if you ever watch The Jeffersons, but we we moved to Queens, and to Laurelton, Queens. And I tell this story a lot, but it's relevant to being believed in early. And Laurelton was a lovely little town, lovely community. It had been predominantly white, predominantly Jewish and Italian. But as it was slowly becoming more racially integrated, it was kind of still a middle-class community, but more and more black families were moving in, and unfortunately that led to some racial tension, let's put it this way. And I was in junior high school at the time, and let's put it this way, our school became the epicenter for a lot of negative racial incidents, to the point where the school board decided the only way to solve this problem is to actually create another junior high school, an annex in Rosedale, which was a town just over from Laurelton. But in Rosedale, it was more predominantly white. And basically, what happened was that all of the white parents in my school, in junior high school 231, decided to take their kids and move them to the annex, leaving 231 as a segregated, all-black school. And my parents, who'd come to the United States in search of the American dream, on the assumption that where the white kids go, that's where the better education will be, they were going to send me to that school too. And as you can tell, I have a certain reverence for my parents, right? As I write my book, like my parents would crawl through broken glass if they thought that would be better for their kids. And but in this decision, the idea of me going to this other school, it just didn't feel right. Like I loved my school, I loved my teachers, and there was this underlying thing, why, just because now it's gonna be a school with all black kids, why does that mean it has to be worse, right? And so the Sunday night before the transfer papers were to be put in, I did something I never thought that I would do. I challenged my parents, and because I was asking them to believe in me, I said, please don't send me. I want to stay in my school. And I literally, it's one of these moments you remember. I cried and I pleaded with my parents, say, I love my teachers, I love my school. I'll work hard. No, seriously. I had to make all these promises. And there's something, I really feel that moment connected back to my own parents when my father wrote to my mom's parents for her hand in marriage, and she wanted to go. She wanted to go all the way to England to marry this man, and would her parents allow her? And I always think that these two moments are connected, where when her parents said, yes, we believe in you, we believe in Vincent, go with God. They went to get married. I always think that that's connected to the moment where my parents said, yes, okay, we believe in you, we're going to stick with this school. And it was the first time, like there was nothing I'd ever felt actually that I really needed to fight for. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I just knew that something didn't feel right.
What happened?
They said yes. I stayed at 231, and you know, it was amazing. Like I actually call it my coming of agency moment, because the first time I felt so invested in a decision, because I now had.
How old were you at this time?
This was 12.
12.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So I now felt that I needed to make sure my parents never regretted the decision to have me go to this school. And so, you know, it's interesting. What would my life be like today? Like, let's say they said no and they sent me to this other school. Would I have done the things that I've done? Would I feel as invested in my own education? Would I feel that I want to run schools where other young people are able to discover their own coming of agency moment, where they now have ownership? I don't know. It's hard to you know, find the counter pathway. And what's interesting, you know, full disclosure, junior high school 231 unfortunately did become one of the worst performing schools over time. Now it's been taken over by several charter schools. So in a weird way, my parents were right in the sense of the level of education did over time go down in that building. And maybe in some ways that's another reason I run schools. Like, why did that have to happen, right? Like, just because we changed the demographic of the school, suddenly there were worse outcomes. And I'm convinced that that experience has made me feel the racial demographic or the economic demographic of any institution, particularly a school, should have no relation to the high expectations that you have for everyone in that school. And so that's what I try to fight for today.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll get to more on the education front, but thank you. I knew some of that story, but not the full context, so thank you for sharing that. Looking back on your early career, I mean, MTV, Gates Foundation, public prep, I mean, how do you think how does this make sense in what God was paving this path for you?
You know, I think, like
Maybe going from engineering to a
yeah, I know. I was,
to MBA.
No, the through line of my life is weird. You know, I know I've had amazing, you know, I was a computer science engineer, MBA, Anderson Consulting, and White House, and
Well, that's right. I forgot the White House as well. Yeah.
no, but I think the through line of my work, the calling that I feel is that, again, I've been very blessed in my life. And I know it didn't just come from nowhere. I know that it came from my parents, their belief in God, their focus on education, but fundamentally this idea that I benefited to the point where I know that I can be my own agent. And we're going to talk about this because there's sometimes a tension between the sense of self-determination but also of faith in terms of surrender. So we'll talk about that. But the through line of my work is that almost everything that I've done is about empowering others to be able to reach their God-given potential. And obviously it's easy to see that running schools, but even when I was at the Gates Foundation, White House, even MTV, my job at MTV was how to use the power of this massive multimedia brand to empower tens of millions of young people all across the world. So, you know, so my job at MTV was not, you know, producing music videos, but it was about how to integrate messages of empowerment into those music videos, right? So lots of work around voting, around, you know, getting young people active in taking control of their lives. And whether that be fighting for educational opportunity, supporting, you know, efforts around the environment. So anyway, the point is, the through line of my work is how to help others become agents of their own uplift. And because that's what I was given the gift as I was growing up.
Yeah, moving on to the faith journey, I mean, what do you think was the defining faith moments? Either Genesis toward, or maybe a turning point?
I mean, I do think that experience
Your
with
grandmother?
with my seeing my grandmother's funeral. That was the first time. Again, you know, we'd been raised in the church and all that, but I just never experienced what it meant in action. Maybe the way to put it is that up until that point, my religious faith was sort of more like of an internal belief.
Intellectual?
Yeah, intellectual, and also you pray at dinner, you know, but I never see the outward manifestation of what it means.
Wonderful.
And that was, I think, a turning point. How do you put your faith in action? That's, that's how I try to live my life.
We should have had you as speaker number one.
What's that?
We should have had you as speaker number one.
Exactly.
That's
Well,
what
faith at work.
we've been trying to promote that, yeah.
Yeah.
What scriptures or faith principles anchor you today? Do you have anything that's consistent or?
God helps those who help themselves. And it's an interesting phraseology, because there's an inherent tension. Again, we're going to come back to this idea of agency and surrender, because, you know, one of my challenges with my own faith is that I often ask the question, you know, what would God do in this situation, or what is God calling me to do? And because I feel it's my responsibility. Ultimately, I've got to push as much as I can, and then maybe that last piece, which I have no control over, you know, that's where God can come in and close the deal for me. But this idea of God helps those who help themselves, I feel, is really powerful, because as much as we have our faith, He's also given us free will, right? And so the question is, how do you exercise that? In what direction? Are you helping yourself in exercising your free will? And so the reason I spend so much time talking about this concept of ordered liberty, like we have freedom, but ordered liberty is leading a life organized, some kind of moral framework, which for me is my faith. And so this idea of God helps those who help themselves. So I've got to, self-determination, responsibility, all of those things are just very important concepts. So, but again, there is a tension there, in that there is a level of faith which requires surrender, which requires the ability to say, actually, I'm not in control. And so that you just have to find that right balance.
Yeah, maybe I'll just call an audible here, but maybe quickly discuss the book you wrote on agency and the concept of free, and then I'll follow up. I mean, obviously set it up, all the things you control yourself, and then again, the question will be, how does that reconcile with God is in control, He's in charge. So again, if you have this fast driving, clear views, what you want to accomplish, and then what are the conflicts, or how do you reconcile those two big concepts?
So as we talked about, I've had a great career working with lots of different young people from lots of different backgrounds: rich, poor, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, kids growing up in tough situations, domestic violence, homeless shelters, and I've just seen lots of different young people make their path through life where, unfortunately, if they had a tough background, they may, as they entered young adulthood, were making decisions where they recreated the same dysfunction that they experienced growing up. And it's really, honestly, it's tragic and heartbreaking to see that. And yet in my same 30 years doing this work, I've seen young people in those same tough conditions make different sets of decisions where they broke the cycle, right? Where they put themselves on a very positive trajectory of their life, where they were becoming agents of their own uplift. And so the question is, what makes the difference, right? What is it about those kids that were in these conditions that they felt they had no other choice but to recreate the dysfunction that they saw? And my observation was that the difference was that these kids that were able to break the cycle, they had a sense of personal agency, that they had a belief that they could lead a self-determined life of meaning and purpose. But what was also evident was that this concept of agency didn't come from nowhere. And I say this often, agency is individually practiced, but socially empowered. And when I looked at young people who were able to break the cycle, the things that I saw, the 4 institutions that seemed to be common was this concept of free: family, religion, education, and entrepreneurship. And this idea around family was that for a lot of kids who are in tough situations, sometimes that's a function of the family that they're from. But what I realized with young people, the young people that are able to break the cycle of disadvantage recognize that whatever dysfunction they may have experienced in the family that they were from, what was more important was the family that they were on the pathway to form.
Yep.
Right? That in a generation, you can change your life. And everyone has complicated relationships with their family, but if you feel that what you've experienced is not what you want for your own life or for your own children, you have the power to change that. And so the young people I saw break that cycle saw that and moved in a different direction. So that was one of the first observations after looking, over 30 years. The second was this idea of religion, that most of the young people who broke the cycle of disadvantage typically had some kind of personal faith commitment. They lived by a moral code, and that moral code almost always was driven by religious faith. There are a lot of kids that live by a moral code and can join a gang because there's like a set of beliefs that you can gravitate towards. And so it's really interesting to see when you see, for example, a lot of young people in gangs, it's almost like that life offers the same kind of belongingness, because we're creatures. We need that framework, right, to be part of. And so, but the kids I saw break that cycle were drawn to the kind of faith which was empowering, and it was drawn to a community of people that loved you, that expected you to live up to this moral code. There were rituals like going to church on Sunday or whatever it may be. And so that, again, this is just my observation, 30 years. What breaks the cycle? Kids who recognize that it was not about the family that they're from, it was about the family they're on the pathway to form, and a religious faith commitment. Another element, education. These young people able to break the cycle typically benefited from some kind of school choice or an education that their parents had been able to choose for them. I mean, I just launched Vertex Partnership Academies in a district in which only 7% of kids graduate from high school ready for college. And there's a cap in New York City. You can't open new schools to serve the other 93%, And so it sounds simple, but that's one of the elements. If we want to have more young people really live up to their God-given potential, these elements matter: the family, religion, education. And then what I saw, if those 3 were in place, if those 3 institutions, those 3 pillars were active in a young person's life, then that usually led to the last E in free, which I call entrepreneurship. And when I say entrepreneurship, I don't only mean someone who's starting a business, but it's someone who has an entrepreneurial mindset, an overcomer's mindset, the ability to handle inevitable challenges when they come your way, right? Because that's what life is all about. I mean, the reason I run schools is I want our students to know that they can do hard things, right? It's really important. So after having all this experience, I said, well, let's write a book. So I wrote a book called Agency, and I really do feel that, because I've gotten some incredible feedback from many people who say that was their life story. The reason they were able to be a better version of their self is that at some point they recognized that their own family was really important, that they recognized that religious faith was crucial, that they recognized they had to have, or that their parents recognized that they had to have access to a great education. So again, for me, it's not a religious book, but it's my faith in action for how I'm trying to help more young people understand what their life can be.
We had a great breakfast this morning with Dave Dillon and two of his colleagues, but the whole issue of some very well-meaning people would say, if you have the discussions on family, you are blaming the victims. So many, particularly single moms or grandmothers, are doing everything possible, doing God's work on steroids, if you will, to help their kids. And so again, the whole concept of you're not blaming the adults, this really more from a, can you get this consensus of how do you educate and train, if you will, the next generation for what outcomes they want. Again, but somehow the narrative is getting even more divisive, as opposed to a building consensus toward moving there.
Well, you know, oftentimes when you are talking about how to solve many of the social issues that many of us care about, poverty or crime or, you know, maleducation, it's far easier to go to what I call like technical solutions or interventions, like what's the policy we need here, or which is not unimportant. I mean, I work at American Enterprise Institute, so policy is extremely important. But there's a reach for policy that's here, but really transforming the human condition like goes a little bit further, right? And so there are other institutions outside of, you know, policy making or government that really matter, and it can be very prickly to talk about things like family structure. But the data is overwhelming. When you look at issues facing a lot of young people raised in married two-parent households, you know, I have another picture of a map, but we won't go there. But typically tend to do better than kids raised in single-parent households. That's data. That's not demonizing single mothers. And it is important to say that simply because a child is raised in a married two-parent household is certainly no guarantee of success. And I've had, you know, lots of experience in the same way that a child raised in a single-parent household is no guarantee of failure. But the data is overwhelming. And so when we're trying to help young people think about what are the levers in their control, this idea of the family that you're from, it's just really important to help them think about these things in a way that's empowering, not demonizing. And that is an important part of the conversation that oftentimes people can become offended by. And one of the reasons I often am trying to activate faith leaders in particular to talk about issues of family is hopefully it can be done in such a way that it's not judgmental or not demonizing or not blaming, but in fact empowering to let you know, as it relates to your life, these are the big things that can really make a huge difference.
At least obviously not a scientific sample, but lots of the single moms or grandmothers that I know, I mean, that's, you know, what they're actually communicating to the kids in terms of
They're there.
And all four of those things actually quite often is what they're, so quite often it's the policymakers that make assumptions that somehow educating the kids on those things is attacking the single parents who, again, in many ways, that's what they would love for their kids to have those priorities, a personal perspective.
Yes, that is true.
So let's move on to that big topic, and for anyone that's achiever, places like Beverly Hills, Greenwich, Lake Forest.
Yeah.
So somehow it's, people have, at least in theory, agency. So the whole concept of it's not you, somebody else above is
Right.
in control, you need to surrender. So how do you reconcile those two items?
Well, and I will confess, it is a challenge for someone who likes to preach this message
Yeah.
of self-determination. One of our cardinal virtues is courage. I reject victimhood
Yeah.
and boldly persevere, even in times of uncertainty and struggle. Our students recite those words every single morning.
Yeah.
So there is this.
Is that one of the charts?
That is one of the slides. Yeah, if we can show it,
This
that'd
is
be great.
important. Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of time with my own children too, imparting this message of you can do it. There are all sorts of challenges. This is not a nirvana world where everything is just fine and dandy. There are real barriers, real challenges. The question is, what do you control? So Viktor Frankl, if you ever man's search for meaning, I quote him in my book.
We just did a not Bible study, a book club on that just earlier.
Meaning?
Yeah, just a fabulous
it's
book.
it's really one of the most important books I think every young person should read. The context of him being in a concentration camp and trying to understand how did people survive those conditions. And he boils it down to this idea that regardless of the external stimuli, regardless of all these other forces, the one thing you can control, right, the space in between external stimuli and your reaction to it, that space is agency, right? That space is your ability to figure out what is it that I'm going to do in this situation, as horrific or as terrible or even as pleasant as it may be. What am I going to do? And so I spend a lot of time encouraging young people to grab hold of that space, right? Because there's going to be a lot of narratives, there are going to be a lot of people telling you that because of your race or your class or your gender or all these other things, this is what you do not have the ability to do, right? You're going to, or it might be you're going to get cancer or you're going to be in a terrible accident. Whatever it is, there's going to be some level of external stimuli in your life that's going to make you think, I am powerless in this situation. I have to wait for someone else to do something before I can get what I need done. And so that's the agency I often preach, which is almost like this superhuman thing. But there is a tension.
The surrender.
Right, there is a tension where actually sometimes you are powerless. And you do have to reconcile those things. And I don't know, I've come to the conclusion that the two things can coexist in that, this idea that God helps those who help themselves. You equip yourself as much as possible. You build your family, you build your life, you do all the right things against the framework that, you've committed your life to, your faith life to. But what you don't control is the outcome.
Yep.
Right? It's always good to use sports metaphors, but you see some, great team. You see the New England Patriots who have a perfect season. They don't lose at all, and then they play a team,
The Giants,
that everyone thinks it's going to be a walkover. And then the Giants win.
Crazy catch,
What's that?
The very unusual catch,
So you do everything right, and then still the outcome. So it may not be a perfect metaphor, but that's how I've come to reconcile, because that's really we talked about my relationship with God, this idea, God helps those who help themselves. So my feeling is I've got to equip myself and my students to know that they have power in their life, and yet you can't control everything, and you have to live with that. But whatever the outcome is, what you do own is your response to it.
Yep.
And that's a really powerful way to be.
Probably only covered half the questions I was hoping to do, but it was overambitious. Hopefully just short answers, and then left to have a Q&A with the group. The first one is a layup. Tell us about your family, both Sylvia, Camille, and Oscar. And second, what you'll be praying for, and then we're going to open it for questions from the group.
Oh, well,
The
my
first
own
one is the
family.
family, yeah.
My own family.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed to have my wife, Sylvia. We were about to celebrate our 19th wedding anniversary.
Keeps getting better.
What's that?
Keeps getting better.
Well, my parents were married for 48 years.
Yeah.
You can't get to 50 unless you get to 19, right?
Yeah.
So we're about to go on vacation to Harbor Island in the Bahamas, which is a lovely, tiny island. It's 3 miles long, half a mile wide, and we were married there.
All four of you, or just the two of you?
No, all four of us.
All four, yeah.
of us. So I haven't told my wife this yet, but I'm thinking for our 20th, should we go back to do redo our vows?
If she's listening, she'll text you back.
So we're about to go there. So and both of our children, were baptized there. So
Yep.
it's a very special place. But we are very blessed. My Oscar is 14, Camille is 16. Both of them came into our lives. Camille made us a family when we adopted her. And then Oscar came in.
Miracle baby?
Oscar was a miracle baby. Literally, he had some complications at birth, had a major surgery, 4 years old, and I'm 4 days old, and was in the NICU for the first 5 to 6 weeks of his life. And the first day we physically got to hold him was on Thanksgiving Day, 10 days after he was born. So God runs through things in a whole bunch of
Yeah, I'm still
ways.
looking for that. You said there's a CBS story on it?
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for that link, yeah.
So Oscar was born on November 17th. It was he had something called an omphalocele, which is when your abdominal muscles are born. You're born on the outside of your body. It's and unfortunately, many parts of the world, if that happens, the kid doesn't. Anyway, he had surgery, and we held him. So he was in the NICU. We literally could not hold him. We had to, you have to put your hands through this machine to get gloves, and it was. Anyway, the first day we flesh to flesh was on Thanksgiving Day, November 27th, 2011. But he was a miracle baby but then there were other complications, and so he had to stay in the hospital. So it wasn't until Christmas that we were able to bring him home, and CBS, they were looking for one of these feel-good stories, and so they filmed us literally when we brought Oscar home. And
Can't wait to see it.
And then Camille, who's 2 years old, she's on camera saying, when Oscar comes through the door, and she says, "Oh, I want to give him a hug." Oh my gosh. First of all, it was great television, but it was just a great moment for us.
Camille was adopted, right?
Yes, Camille
Was it a long process?
Actually, it was not a long process. So Spence Chapin is the name of the adoption agency that we adopted Camille through, and it's an incredible organization.
Awesome.
And so they helped us, Sylvia and I, become a family. And I became so enamored with the organization that I became heavily involved, got on the board, and now I'm chairman of the board of Spence Chapin. And so adoption is very important to me, and hopefully something more people can recognize is a wonderful pathway to form your own family.
Before questions, anything we should be praying for, or anything that, I know we're going to cover other things as well, but I love listening to you.
Oh, I don't know. I just pray that everyone recognizes that their family is. Families can be challenging. Families are complex. But they are the source of so much joy and who you can be. And in fact, before you can solve all the other problems in the world, I pray that folks realize if I start here, my own relationships, my own spouse, my own children, that's a good place to start before, becoming master of the universe. Yeah.
And man, with that family and people closest to you, non-family relationships is number one.
Yeah.
Questions? Well, maybe Bob beat you.
Thanks, Ian. When I think about you, I think of you as someone with an uncommon combination of IQ and EQ, and someone who has an uncommon combination of being a scholar, but also a leader, okay? A lot of scholars in the world of academia don't really know how to apply their scholarly work to putting it into action on the ground, and you do.
Yep.
And it seems to me that, and you also have great communication skills, the ability to communicate a message that resonates deeply. And so I'm wondering kind of what's next. How do we take this uncommon combination of your scholarly work and your leadership skills and your ability to leverage that to have an even greater impact on some of the things that you're trying to achieve? I know that's a hard question, but I think there's a bigger and broader world out there for you to be able to take advantage of for the benefit of all.
Well, I appreciate that question. I'm actually often asked that question about, is there something bigger for me? Well, this is where God helps those who helps themselves. I don't know the outcome. I don't ultimately know the answer to that question. I do know that I feel like I'm on a path right now to help more people recognize their inner potential that right now may be being suppressed for any number of reasons. And if I can create more of a stage, more of a platform for concepts like agency, the importance of family, the importance of religious faith, the importance of education, then that journey, like saying that will lead me to whatever the next thing is. I've been asked to consider running for mayor of New York City, especially because the incoming mayor, You'll move there. Oh my God. Oh, see, that's interesting. The current mayor, people are leaving the city. Or not, sorry, the incoming mayor. That's interesting. That's, but I don't, but the thing is, I actually don't know if that's the highest and best use of my faith. I try to encourage people all the time to figure out what's your thing. Like, what's the thing that's going to really drive you? Yesterday morning I woke up in Washington, D.C., had an amazing meeting with the U.S. Department of Education, did a presentation then in Washington in the Power of Innovation Summit, took a plane here to Chicago, and we had an amazing evening last night, and people are like, Ian, that's crazy. And I say, what? I get to do that.
And don't forget the 6:30 breakfast this
I
morning.
know we had a 6:30 breakfast. But then next week I'll be back in my school in the Bronx, because that's where as wonderful as it is, the amazing thing is when I go back to the Bronx and I'm interacting with my students. And so that's a pretty great life, And so I don't know what my ultimate outcome is. I just know that continuing to do this will lead me in whatever that ultimate impact position will be.
Well, aim high and be bold.
Aim high and be bold.
And aiming high does not necessarily mean just scale, but impact. People are really looking for those role models, and then people quite often say, how do you replicate it? So again, bold, absolutely aim high, but then scale is not everything, as I'm learning. Anyway, just a perspective.
Yep. And courage.
Yep.
Courage, the first virtue.
Ian, thanks for speaking to us this morning. From a policy standpoint, are there things that you're passionate about that you would love to see happen from a policy standpoint?
Yeah, from a policy perspective, because as much as I do want to cultivate young people to have a sense of agency, the belief that they can lead a self-determined life, policy matters. In our country, things like access to great schools is fundamental. So the concept of school choice. What's interesting to me about people who typically oppose school choice is that they often exercise it in their own lives, right? Because they're able to send their kids to a great private school, or they move to the suburbs, or whatever. They're able to get their kids the education that they want. And so why not have that be available to the most vulnerable among us? So school choice would be really important. At this very moment, there's a federal tax credit being discussed, which I think could be a game changer, which could generate billions of dollars in philanthropy that could be then converted into scholarships for low-income kids to be able to pay tuition at private schools, religious schools, or for public school students to pay for things like tutoring or SAT prep. So I think that's extremely important. I do think the importance of family cannot be underestimated or overestimated, in that family matters, but often when you look at our systems that report outcomes, rarely do you see the relationship between things like family structure and outcomes. You usually see outcomes by race, gender, class, which are important, but when you're omitting what arguably is the most powerful force in the life of a young person, which is the health and stability of the family that they're raised in, we're missing something. So something I'm really spending more and more time on is how do we get family structure to become a data category in all of our reporting on social issues in the same way that you see reporting by race, gender. So imagine seeing data, what's the difference between young people raised in a married two-parent household versus other family structures on a whole range, educational outcomes, crime, poverty, and as you start to see the data, it becomes clear that family structure is our greatest lever when it comes to child outcomes.
Last one, yeah.
Sure. I am glad you were talking about schools, and I love that you stay involved as a doer by running Vertex. And I also know that you use the cardinal virtues as a tool in the school, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the impact that has, and maybe an anecdote or two, like help us learn, like meet one of the students.
Well, that's a perfect exiting question. I don't know
Hey,
if we
Stu, guys, can you guys put the orange slide with the 4 cardinal virtues?
Yeah. So one of the things running schools that becomes very clear, and it would be good if they
there it is,
perfect. When you have children 8 to 10 hours per day in your school, whether you like it or not, you are in the moral formation business, right? There are some school leaders who take that responsibility very seriously, and others, no, I'm just focused on reading and math. And it's important to focus on reading and math, but we have to recognize that schools as an institution have a formative role to play. So the first decision we made when launching Vertex Partnership Academies was what do we want to do as it relates to moral formation? And I didn't want to pull, whatever the answer to that question wasn't going to be something that we just generate. And they're virtues that have been known for eons, right? The word cardinal comes from the Latin root cardo, which means hinge or axis, right? So the cardinal virtues of courage, justice, temperance, wisdom, these are the original Platonic virtues. All other standards of moral excellence emanate from these 4 virtues. So gratitude, determination, perseverance, optimism, all of those character-based strengths, these are the foundation. So the very first decision we made was, what are we anchoring our entire community in? And what's interesting is that in our first year, we just said courage, justice, temperance, wisdom. But what we recognized, what temperance meant to one person or what courage meant to, right? So we had to make the implicit explicit. So we came up with what we call our I statements. And so every morning, if everyone ever comes to visit Vertex in the Bronx, you will see our students in their beautiful blazers and ties, standing strong, saying for courage, I reject victimhood and boldly persevere, even in times of uncertainty and struggle. Or temperance, I lead my life with self-discipline because I am responsible for my learning and my behavior. And there's so many anecdotal stories. I uphold our common humanity and honor the inherent dignity of each individual. We talk to our students about that concept. You're not special because you're black. You're not unspecial because you're black, right? Or you're a girl, or whatever the superficial characteristic. You're special because we all share this common humanity. You have inherent dignity. You're worthy of respect, right? Those are really powerful concepts. Frankly, if we did nothing else with our students other than impart these virtues to become a way of life, I would feel that we have accomplished an enormous objective. So.
Thank you. We always finish with a prayer.
Oh,
A Father's prayer.
yes.
Yep. Lord's Prayer. Yep.
Right. Thank you so much, Ian and Mike. When Jesus' students gathered around him and said, "Teach us to pray," this is what he taught them. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory,
Forever.
Forever and ever. Amen.
amen.
Thanks, brother.
That's it.
This was extraordinary. This is one of the great ones.
Oh, my
Thank
gosh.
you.